when you start a company and you're founding, you're doing it off of an assumption or a hypothesis. You've identified a problem in the market and you've come up with a solution to that problem. Startup scale, that initial 0 to 1 or 2 million is all about testing that hypothesis and seeing what kind of company you can build based on the problem you want to solve. So through that journey, you're fine-tuning the product or service and you're growing the company. As I just mentioned, you'll have a lot of data points that you can go back and review. One thing that we recommend first before entering into that second stage of scale is getting recentered on who is your customer. Oftentimes, what we'll find is that if a CEO continues down the same path without iterating and realigning with the type of buyer that they want more of, they'll continue to get more of maybe what they don't want. So let me make that a little bit more specific. Let's say there's a tech product and you're able to sell this to SMB as well as mid-market, and then you have a couple of larger companies. Well, the CEO may say, as we continue to grow, I'm going to have a small market team, a mid-market team, and enterprise because we have customers across all three of those segments. So I want to grow them all. Okay. But what if a new competitor in the market was built specifically for enterprise that solves your exact same problem and they just raised 17 million? And they're going to leapfrog in the market. And so it's a complete uphill battle. And if you had done a competitive analysis and looked at where you are, and then also maybe you ran an internal report and looked at the numbers. Maybe you're completely upside down and not profitable on those enterprise accounts. Maybe you didn't take into consideration that the skill set and knowledge of your customer success team or implementation team to work on those enterprise accounts is actually a hefty requirement that you are not fulfilling today. So in order to scale in the enterprise, the cash outlay is actually significant. And so it's not equal parts. Let's equally grow in SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. And so what we want to look at, number one, is the go-to-market strategy. And we want to understand how the brand is performing and how the brand is perceived by the market. So step one is to understand who's the customer. We love doing voice of the customer surveys. This is a great exercise anybody can implement, and you should get a good sampling of all the different types of companies that you serve. So you can see the variance from small to large or across different industries, or potentially if it's across different geographies. But interview these customers. Also look at the internal data. Talk to the success team, talk to the support team, and really identify who is the ideal customer. Meaning if you just had to pick one, okay, maybe two, that you could build your whole client base off of, who would it be? And a lot of CEOs and founders need to go from this wide vision into a very focused vision. The get niche, get rich saying is very true. And if they can say, even though we serve about 10 different types of companies, we find that these two are the most profitable. They seem to be the ones who understand us the most. We have a shorter sales cycle on them and a higher average revenue per sale. Well, that sounds like a brilliant recipe for scaling. So voice of the customer, one. Two, review the data and fine tune and trim down the list. You should have one, maybe two ICPs out of the gate. Some of our clients, we have landed on 3 or 4 or 5 ICPs, which is fine. It just adds a lot of complexity to building out the revenue engine. So if you can start with 1 or 2, you're in a great spot. And I would narrow it down based on that. The third step is a competitive analysis. Who else is playing in this space? What is the experience they're creating for the buyer on social media, organic media, paid media, podcast, webinar, broadcasting strategies, outbound sales team, advertising? What ways are they communicating with and attracting the buyers? And then we recommend secret shopping as a part of that process. Secret shop, figure out what the process is, how many steps are in, how many handoffs, what kind of questions they're asking, where the demo step is, what kind of proposal, pricing, the whole kit and caboodle. Based on that data, you should be able to fine tune. So we did customer interviews, then we narrowed down our specific profile. Then we truly understand who we're competing against. From there, you should have your brand and go-to-market strategy.
Mm-hmm. Tell me some of the questions that you want to ask in the voice of the customer interviews to help you narrow down um, into that, yeah, more specific ideal customer.
We like to ask questions both that are subjective and objective. And we want to make sure that we're understanding experience questions as well as data driven questions. I love starting by asking, how did you find out about this company? And I also want to understand what was the problem or challenge that you were facing that prompted you to engage with this company as part of your buying decision. We try to get as granular as possible with what their process was like, other competitors that they evaluated, but we really want to understand from a psychological standpoint how this buyer went from their old way of doing things to identifying that they had a problem, that they were ready, willing, and able to invest in solving it, who they met with, who they met, what the process was, and then why they made the decision to work with that company. So that's number one that we want to uncover. Number two, we want to ask about their experience through implementation. What was it like working with sales, which is that front part, and then explain the experience with the handoff and onboarding as a customer. What worked really well? Where is there room for opportunity? What the company do right? Where is there room for improvement? From there, we want to talk about ongoing relationship, meaning how frequently they're using, if they could rate their level of adoption. But we want to get into some numbers. We want to hear claims and ROI statements of anything that they can do to show us, hey, we increased efficiency by 57%, or we reduced fill in the blank by X%, or we were able to save this amount of cost or dollars, or even if they can explain more in a scenario by using the software, we were able to reduce headcount, whatever it might be, or we entered a new market, or fill in the blank. But we're looking for those proof statements. One of my favorite questions, or a series of questions to dig into, is why they remain a customer. Because the competition's always knocking at the door. And if from an account management or customer success standpoint, if you're not intentionally and proactively working to retain your customer, your competition is. Your competition is knocking down their door and planting seeds and building a relationship to move them away from you. And if you're not engaged in a relationship with your customers, eventually that competitor is going to earn the relationship. And so I want to understand if the client or the company is doing a tremendous job retaining them, or if there's area for improvement. And then last but not least, just overall, if you could change anything about the product or service, the company, the people, what would it be and why? And just getting that really specific feedback is important.